Hi, my name is Renee Hansen, and I'm doing my presentation on Chapter 7, Question 4. The question states, does market segmentation have any limitations, and if so, what are they? I wanted to start out by defining market segmentation, and according to our textbook, is the division of the overall market for a service into groups of people with common characteristics. The basic reason for market segmentation is that trying to appeal to all potential customers, the untargeted approach, is wasteful. We are going to look at what the limits are in market segmentation. Yes, it's good to group people into different categories, but it also has problems and issues with that. The textbook states 4 of these limits. 1, it's more expensive than using a non-segmented approach. 2, difficult to select the best customer characteristics to use for segmenting a market. 3, difficult to know how finely or broadly to segment. 4, tendency to appeal to segments that are not viable. So looking at the first issue or limit with market segmentation would be it's more expensive. You need advertisements, you need websites, advertisements, promotions, Facebook has advertisements all over all the time. That costs money. Because of each additional target market brings an extra cost. Each must be examined individually to determine whether pursuing it is worthwhile in terms of returning the investment. You can spend millions and millions of dollars on all this advertisement and never see it returned if you've selected the wrong market segment to direct all of your marketing towards, which in return doesn't make you or your business any money. Number 2, it's difficult to select the best segmentation characteristics. Many segmentation characteristics can be used. You list off characteristics of yourself and what groups you might think you fall into or what you do fall into based on your religion, based on activities that you like to do yourself. I did find this article called Weakness of Marketing Segmentation by Stan Mack, and he says a major weakness of the marketing segmentation is how difficult it can be to decide which variable is most important. It's a dilemma. You need to decide who your target audience is, but what if you capture the wrong thing? The marketer's dilemma is to decide which characteristics or combination of characteristics will produce the best return on the marketing investment. Once again, you want to appeal to a group that's actually going to bring in a source of income for your business, not, wasting your money and time on targeting an audience that potentially won't even be looking for the type of business that you provide. Number 3 in the textbook, difficult to know how finely or broadly to segment. I think 2 and 3 go along really well together because it's true. You don't want to be focusing on one thing and not another and missing out on another. That same article says focusing on one or several of these factors over others can be the difference between success and failure, making marketing segmentation a risky enterprise. In the textbook, we do read that it is beneficial to target certain audiences, but with the limitations that the whole world is so different and variable, what if you are just barking up the wrong tree the whole time? You are not providing what is needed for your business. There was a really good example that I read about a bakery. This bakery is a small bakery in this town, but if it's the only bakery, it needs to make sure that it's known. It doesn't really need a target audience. But isn't that the same thing? Say you are a B&B in a convention city. Bigger hotels are going to get most of the customers, most of the people staying there, not people looking for this niche little market of a B&B. If that's the last resource available, they'll go there, but that's not what they're seeking. They're seeking a business-oriented hotel. I personally work at a convention hotel. We have business people at all times coming through for citywide conventions. My hotel is down the street from the Colorado Convention Center. This is the market that we are in. We appeal to the business traveler. We're family-oriented as well, but because of the convention center being right there, that's going to be our most viable customer. We provide them a product that they're looking for. We have all the amenities that they need, and they don't even have to take a taxi down to the convention center. They literally walk a block and a half. Don't want to waste your time on something that is not viable enough. And that leads into the fourth example in our textbook, tendency to appeal to non-viable segments. And a few things that they list there are some groups may be too small to justify the marketing investment required. And that goes along with, that example of the little bed and breakfast being in a city that is a convention-oriented city for their hotels. It's too small. It's probably not going to work out if it's trying to appeal to the business person. There are other aspects that maybe it's just known that it's there, and it can market that way to a broader spectrum of people rather than trying to fit in among the larger hotels for that convention. Another one is some segments may not be permanent. Going along with that, may be fad-oriented and only exist for a few years. Now, that brings up an even bigger dilemma in itself, especially we have new fads arising all the time in the tourism industry, and luckily for that, there are niche markets. But within what we're looking at here, you don't want to have a hotel that's specific to a fad at the time, where then you have to spend tons of money a couple years later to then keep up with the next fad. It's bringing in a small source of income for maybe that long of a segment for that one thing that's so interesting at the time, but as soon as something else comes along, no one's going to be wanting to stay at your hotel or go to your destination because it's no longer the cool thing to do. That's kind of an issue that I think arises even with the ecotourism segments, even though it has a very large grasp and hold right now. For a while it was a big fad, but it hasn't gone anywhere. People are more oriented on being green and respecting the lifestyles of the cultures in those places, eco-lodges and whatnot, and trying to be sustainable. But I think that's a perfect example of something that could have been a fad but hasn't gone away yet. It has been around for quite a while. Another thing that it says is other segments may be so dominated by one or more large companies that a newcomer that chooses to pursue these segments will find it both expensive and unrewarding. I think that once again goes along with, say you have a small business, especially running that, using the same example as that B&B. You have this small business that just decided to start in a big city. But instead of trying to compete with all these other big companies that are already established, you have to come up with something new, because otherwise it's going to cost a lot of money. And are you going to see that money returned? Probably not. So, although in our textbook it does say that it's a good thing to break up customers into categories and groups, it's not necessarily the go-to all the time, because it does have its limitations. And you do have to know your markets. You have to know the people and doing the research behind it. Not necessarily grouping people together, but knowing the area in which you want your business to run, knowing the people, knowing the customers. I mean, we did read that chapter all about customer behavior. You have to know that in order to appeal to the market, and not necessarily targeting specific groups all the time, because it does have its weaknesses, it does have its limitations. It can only go so far, especially in certain markets. And I think that the tourism and hospitality market is one of those that it can only stretch so far trying to segment every single group, especially when things are always changing. Look at the family dynamics are changing. You might have a family, but that doesn't mean everybody has a family. So, especially when you group yourself into certain groups, you might have a certain religion that you associate with. You might have certain activities that you like to do, so that's another market that you might be looking into. You want to travel to specific places. You and your friends associate with this type of group. Not everything can cover all those bases, but they do try their hardest to appeal to a broader aspect of those. But like my chapter question says, there are limitations, and within those limitations, hospitality has to work with those and just gather the data and gather what they need to succeed.